This one's incredibly interesting. I meant to share this on a different show and completely forgot about it. This one is 10 Yards of Snake, South Carolina, 1893. The monster does seem startling things on the Western Farm. If you should ever pass the Weston Farm near Delphi, Indiana, said John Gilbert to a New York Sun man, you couldn't help but notice a shepherd dog lying on one end of the front porch with his head on his four paws, apparently asleep. He went to sleep, according to the story that Farmer Weston tells, one night in February last, and he has never awakened since. When that dog went to sleep, he weighed about 50 pounds. He now weighs more than 150 pounds, for he is petrified. Some folks declare that he is simply a dog carved from stone, but that is before they have heard Farmer Weston's story. After they hear that, they have nothing more to say. They can't say anything. They simply marvel. Farmer Weston is a member of the Baptist Church and only has one arm, so it is hardly likely that he would lie about a little thing like a petrified shepherd dog. And more than that, the change in the dog's status is really not the most surprising thing about the farmer's story. I was never any nearer the Weston farm than Richmond, Indiana, and consequently I never saw the dog, but a man who saw it not long ago told me the story of Farmer Weston told him about the dog and the amazing manner in which it was petrified. Just after dark one night, this is a really crazy story about an electrical phenomenon. So just bear with me here. Just one night, early in February, the farmer left the house, he said, to go to his barn to attend to his horses for the night. The weather was cold, but there was no wind to stir, so the farmer was surprised to hear a noise like the soughing of heavy wind through the branches of the trees. This sound was all the more surprising because there was no trees anywhere around for the wind to sow in. A public road passes the house 100 yards or so distant, and the noise seemed to be from the direction of the road. Farmer Weston stopped and listened to the singular noise, and he listened. Then he saw a sight no Hoosier farmer ever gazed on before, and he says he is willing to bet his farm on it. And what do you think it was? Said the man. Who said that he was saying just what Farmer Weston had said to him? A snake. Not only a snake, but a fire. Regular fiery serpent came suddenly from the road and wound, wiggled, and zigzagged its way towards Weston, traveling as fast as a steam engine. According to the farmer's data, this fiery snake was 30 feet long and a foot and a half in diameter. Now, naturally, one would suppose that a snake carrying as much fire as that along with it would quickly raise the temperature of the weather in any district it was traveling through. But things worked just to the contrary with the snake. As it approached Farmer Weston, he could feel the temperature getting rapidly lower until he was sure it fell way below zero. This alarmed the farmer, for he hadn't things just fixed around the premise for such a sudden and unprecedented change in weather. Although the fiery serpent was coming right at him, accompanied by the soughing noise he had heard, Farmer Weston did not move from his tracks. But the snake suddenly changed its course when it had come within 20 feet of him and made directly for the barn. As the snake turned from its course, the sound that was traveling with it changed and became exactly such a noise as made by a steam gong. At the same instant, Weston felt a sharp electric shock, and he was unable to move a muscle or utter a sound. He was like one paralyzed. The snake made straight for the barn, climbed right up the side of the building to the roof, and for 5 minutes contorted itself in fiery gyrations all around the outside of the barn. Weston expected every second to see the building burst into flames, but nothing of the kind occurred. At last, the fiery serpent climbed to the peak of the roof and raised up one end of itself perpendicularly in the air, where it swayed and whirled for a minute or more, when there came a sound like the report of a distant cannon, and the startling exhibition was at an end. The fiery serpent disappeared as if it had never been. With the report that doused the glim of the snake, so to speak, Farmer Weston felt another strong electric shock, but it seemed to come as an antidote to the first one, for he instantly recovered the use of his limbs and his voice. The temperature of the weather instantly rose again, and stood where it was before the strange fire of the snake had sent it down. The first thing Farmer Weston did was to go back to the house and confide to his wife what he had seen. She was inclined to pooh pooh him, but at last accompanied him to the barn with a lantern. They were confronted with startling surprises. The first was the effect the fiery serpent's sport had on the barn. The building was covered with what seemed to be a network of icy ropes, evidently marking where the snake had flashed about on around and over the barn. But the network wasn't ice, so far from it that a lighted candle held against the substance would not melt it. Going into the barn, they found their two horses standing motionless in their stalls. They were alive, warm to the touch, and breathing naturally, but they were powerless, even under the lashings of a whip, to move a muscle. The shepherd dog lay on the barn floor, just as he had gone to sleep. The farmer soon discovered that the dog was lifeless. He stooped down to move him and was amazed to find that he could not budge him, and it required the strength of both Weston and his wife to lift him. He had turned to solid stone. 3 days passed, during which time Weston Farm was thronged with people who flocked to see the amazing sequences of the fiery serpent's visit, and the two horses, showing no sign of recovering from their strange paralysis, were killed. In the course of a week, the labyrinth trail of the serpent out the barn crumbled away and fell off, so that the only tangible evidence of the appearance of the fiery, freezing, and paralyzing serpent that Farmer Weston had on hand is the petrified dog. Long one, but yeah, I go on to talk about, make the Medusa reference. And, this fiery serpent that made the air icy cold, um, and paralyzed himself and the horses and petrified the dog. Now, absolutely seems like fantasy, but I've read enough petrified animal people um, articles that they find animals that look like statues and everything you can imagine, people especially. And yeah, that one's just crazy, crazy story. And if anyone's heard the idea of Saint Elmo's fire, this kind of etheric flame, this blue flame that burns cold or is cold to the touch, and they used to see it all the time on ships and trains, and during snowstorms, the houses and fences would align with this blue flame, and yeah, you don't see it so much anymore today, but quite an interesting story. Hard to believe, but definitely worth reading.